Hey everybody, we are live! My name is Jonathan Betzler. This is the 26th meeting of the No Name Cinema Society. Welcome back. And interestingly enough, it is our second consecutive April movie starring Gary Oldman. We did Child 44 episode 7 last April. This tonight we've got Criminal, as you probably know if you're watching on YouTube or somewhere similar to that, because that's the title of this video. I've got my hockey beard going a little bit, so I know you guys will be excited about that. We've got a couple criminals here that are doing the show with me, actually. And from the last episode that we did, back March 28th, I think it was, all I heard about on Twitter and all the fans, all they would talk about is freaking J Money's hair. So for our first criminal is the well-coiffed J Money here.
To the fans.
And of course, there you go. Look at that. Look at that
Hey.
Shaped hair. It's
That's
insane.
Right.
It's a whole new you. It's true. Like you've got so many fans now, girls all over the nation with crushes on you. And it's all about the hair.
It's all about the hair. Just like my entire life, it's always been about the hair. I mean,
yeah.
That's what you guys hired me on, right? To begin with.
Money. Davey makes me wear the hat, so that's why I'm going with a little extra chest hair today. With one less button, so it's like maybe I can get some admirers as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of Davey Joe, this is Drunk Dave Joseph. How you doing, Davey?
I'm doing well.
How was Houston?
That was a good time. I mean, every game ended the way I did not want it to, but whatever. It was fun.
What? How could you not want Villanova to win?
I went to Syracuse, and I hate Villanova. But anyway.
But you grew up in Philadelphia.
I grew up in central Pennsylvania. And go Temple.
I know, but you got to root. Like, my dad went to St. Joseph's, but any Big Five school that was in, we rooted for them.
I didn't. Anyway, they played great. They won. It was a beautiful ending.
That was one of the most amazing things
it was incredible.
I've ever seen.
I had so much fun. I want to go next year in Phoenix.
Regardless who's in it?
Yeah, I think so.
That's awesome. Well, and Davey going to Houston makes up for him having significantly less good hair than J Money and I. So here is the schedule for the evening. So all right, as you can see right now, we're about to talk about Criminal. This is J Money, I guess, calls it the latest feature. I like to call it the current feature, and we'll get into it momentarily. It seems like, at 8:30. Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, is when we're going to talk about David Cronenberg's film A Dangerous Method, and that's coming up right after this. At 9 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, we're going to talk about the film that we all agree was the best film of 1990, sort of, putting a bow on our 1990 in review show from February. We're going to talk about Goodfellas at 9 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific, we've had so many questions about our 1990 discussion that tonight's Sound Off, our freeform segment, is going to be kind of focused on 1990 again. You guys sent us some interesting questions on Twitter, so we're going to be answering those questions, recasting some 1990 films, and also going to redo my top 5 1990 films, updating it from when I made it back in 1991. All right. Excuse me, I have little hiccups from this drinking this beer too quickly. All right, it's time for the summary. So, Criminal is about a CIA agent who goes down in the line of duty, but he takes with him some key information that could help the world avoid nuclear disaster or something. So, the agency takes the extreme step of transferring the memories from the dead agent to a lifelong psychopathic criminal, Jericho, as seen here, played by Kevin Costner. He's an ideal candidate for the transfusion because he had some brain damage as a child. So that is Criminal, and I've got to decide who I want to go to first on this. And I also want to let you guys know that I also brought some people with me who had some thoughts as well on this movie. So let me see here. Let's go to Davy Joe first. Sorry, my buttons are taking some time here.
Yep.
There you go. Now you're on, Davy Joe.
Okay.
Opening thoughts.
I liked the movie. I want to say that it was pretty bad, but I really liked it. So yeah, let's go with that.
Well, we'll go with that for now because my impression is that J Money disagrees. J Money?
Yeah. Well, let me back up and say, like, every year I start by thinking, what'll be the dumbest thing I see this year, and we might have a winner already. It's possible. I just found the title winner for the year. I'm not going to say it was bad, but I will say it was an incredibly dumb movie.
Okay, and I will go on to say that. So I'm going to summarize the feelings of the folks that I brought to see the film. They generally felt like it seemed contrived to feature more action. That was something that I heard a lot about. I guess again I'm summarizing. And I also heard like it felt like a cookie cutter action movie. But the other thing I heard a lot is that they enjoyed the human element more. Like the second half had some more human moments that people seem to like. As far as I'm concerned, I feel like that the premise had some potential, but they really missed the mark. They really missed the opportunity, as far as that was concerned. So I want to kind of start there. I mean, I like the idea. Initially, I was concerned because it seemed it's so sort of it's a bit far-fetched, let's say, the concept, but this idea of transferring memories or whatever. But I mean, like, I was willing to go along with it once they said, oh, he had some frontal lobe damage, and then him being an ideal candidate. Because I mean, I want to understand why they would choose this person out of all people, but I was willing to go along with that idea for a while. I also thought that the villain was kind of intelligent and a force to be reckoned with, and I always liked that in my movies. And I thought the action itself was fairly decent. So those are the good things. They've got some bad things coming up. How do you guys respond to those few good things that I brought up?
No, I agree with all that, and I think that the brain thing that I love that. I don't know if I'm supposed to be laughing about it, but the undeveloped frontal lobe idea I thought was just absolutely brilliant. I think that
brilliant seems like that seems like a strong word.
Brilliant.
I don't know
brilliant
if it was
with
brilliant.
Tongue planted firmly in cheek.
Well, and that's the thing. I did not feel this film was self-aware in that regard. But not Davy Joe, J Money, how do you feel about my positive notes here?
Well, I personally have nothing good to say about this film, but I also want to just clarify. I mean, when I say it's dumb, I don't necessarily have a problem with the premise. Because I think we're going to talk about that a fair amount and talk about like how it's a fairly it takes a certain amount of suspension of disbelief to go with the premise. I don't have a problem with crazy premises. I mean, I certainly love a lot of films that have absolutely out there ideas. I just think the execution of the ideas, which is something that you said initially, was where it fell flat. So I don't, even with everything you guys are describing in terms of good, I just couldn't buy into any of those things being effective for me.
Yeah, I'm eventually going to want to talk about some things I would have done differently, and I feel like there was a lot of unexplored territory. But now let me go in some of the things that were bad. First of all, and we talked about how strong the villain was, because I do think that he was, I frequently get frustrated when a villain is just like kind of lame and not that much to deal with. But the flip side of having such a good villain is the CIA in this movie, and this was brought up too by people I went with, were so incredibly inept, and even I was just like, what are they doing? Like, I mean, like, Jack Bauer would not have handled this the same way, even though obviously he wasn't CIA. But I mean, like, I felt like time after time, I'm questioning, especially Gary Oldman's character's choices here as the head of the CIA in London. First of all, why? There's a lot of whys in this movie, like WHY apostrophe S. The very fact that their agent went dark in public to begin with, in the very beginning of the movie, is highly questionable. That the bad guy's constantly 3 steps ahead of them, and also like when I feel like Gary Oldman's character is constantly ignoring common sense. Like when Jericho's first waking up after the transfusion, he's like yelling at him like inexplicably, and this is a part of the execution thing that I was talking about. J Money, now do you just have nothing to say, or at least back me up on some of these things?
Well, no, I'll agree with all your criticisms, certainly. I think for me, the thing I kept trying to figure out while watching this was whether or not I thought the actors themselves were doing a terrible job, or whether I thought they were just not being directed well, or whether I thought it was a script. And I really, even at this point, can't quite tell you. I mean, there were some really heavy hitters in this film. Gary Oldman, like you're bringing up right now, Kevin Costner, Tommy Lee Jones. I mean, a lot of really famous actors who, to me, were sleepwalking through their roles. I mean, they were giving out incredibly generic, just forgettable performances. And I don't know if it's because they didn't care. I don't know if it's because the director was terrible.
I've got a lot. So many places to go. I feel like every time I bring up a point, you ignore what I say and then start your own points.
No,
you agreed with all of it.
But this is
an answer like this.
You're asking what I think.
You had a generic answer like anything negative you have to say, I will agree with. That was your generic answer.
Okay.
So, Davy Joe, I'll ask you again. What do you think of some of my initial criticisms?
It's funny. I don't remember exactly what your specific criticisms were, and I blame Joe Money for.
I was talking about how I felt how inept the CIA was.
Yeah.
I felt that a lot of Go ahead.
No, the CIA definitely they didn't make any sense. At one point, first of all, they leave the most dangerous man in the world in the back seat of the car, and they're not even paying attention to him at all. And then later on, they don't care anymore. It's forgiven. Don't worry about it.
And he leaves an incredibly high body count in his wake. Like,
and no problem.
Like CIA agents, and there's no repercussions or. I also feel like as he changes into this other person, I feel like there'd be remorse as well.
Oh yeah, like all the cops that he kills. Towards the end of the movie, in the high speed chase. I know. But the ridiculousness of this movie is kind of what I liked. All right. But
let's compare that. If you're going to do that, then let's go back to another ridiculous movie. Let's talk about The Guest. And The Guest, I feel like, is clearly self-aware of these choices that they're making, and I think we all felt that about The Guest. Yes. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and I think that's what makes The Guest. Yeah, and that's what makes The Guest a good movie versus this, which is just fun.
You like this movie? You were the one that liked this movie.
I enjoy it. I'm not going to tell anyone it's a good movie. It's.
All right. Some clarification, ladies and gentlemen. Some other script contrivances I have a real question about. There was a moment where the Gal Gadot character hits an alarm, but I felt like if now that we know that there was an alarm, and this is one of my people that went with me that brought this up, why didn't she do that 20 minutes earlier, when she had plenty of time to do that? And also, it felt like that he was wandering around for a long time until he eventually decides to steal a van. And it also, I couldn't understand, no one explained to me the time limitation of why this procedure was only going to last 48 hours. Nobody said that until it was too late, I felt. So lots of little things, script contrivances that I had a hard time swallowing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're all aboard on that. Now, here's the thing. Here's where I think they missed the mark. Here's where I think it had potential. Because there's something about this procedure and how it can be, wow. And you were asking too, J Money, about something else. All right, you know what? I'm gonna call a timeout, and maybe we'll get to that we have about 6 minutes left. So you wanted to ask whose fault this was.
Yes.
And we've talked about this before in the sense that it's if there's lots of great performances all across the board, like Spotlight, I think was an example we've used, then that's an example of good direction. You know, a director that's keeping everybody in tone, on the same page, and detail, et cetera, et cetera. I think that in this case, we have a lot of questionable choices, and I think this is on Ariel Vroman, the director. Like you asked if it's a screenplay, and I think it's that way because I feel like there's so much potential in the concept and the premise, and we all agree that it's the execution that's a real problem. And the script holes, quote unquote, it's hard to say whether that was there or before or not, because that could easily be stuff created in the edit room by a director who's trying to, feature his action sequences. I do feel like he was focused more on action. He reminded me a little bit of Pierre Morel. Taken is a film that I really enjoy, but Taken, it gets good 10 minutes in, and then the last 10 minutes are also really bad. If there's any, if in the first Taken, if there's any attempt at an emotional scene or some like character development, the movie fails. And I think that's similar in this case, except this movie needed character development. It needed a director that could, either a director that could do both, or another director that could help with these actors, and help these actors explore territory that was a little more interesting. So that's my response to you, J Money. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess what I'm inclined to think that it wasn't necessarily the actors specifically that were at the fault with it. I mean, we definitely know that these actors have turned out great performances before, and they were probably trying to work with something. I think for me, my question was like, are they here because they have to pay some bills? Are they here because they thought it was going to be a good project and then the script came through? I mean, honestly, from my point of view,
I mean, that's kind of why I think that the initial script,
yeah,
with all its potential, my gut tells me that the script, there was something there. Well, that was appealing to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea, certainly, and there are plenty of other films that have explored this a lot, and we've seen a lot of them, and I have a lot of fans. I mean, I'm a fan of Face Off, for instance, which is really in a lot of ways a very similar premise.
I thought of Face Off a lot as well. Yeah. That occurred to me. That comp occurred to me as well. But for what it's worth, I was going to say the dialogue in this film felt incredibly clunky. A lot of the exposition felt incredibly clunky. Immediately, JB, the first 2 seconds into this film, what happens? What do we get? We get a voiceover. We get a voiceover. Yeah, I mean that was. I mean, it wasn't that bad because it ended so quickly. It wasn't that bad.
But it was, to me, it was like a very early sign that I was in for a rough ride. And I went in this movie without knowing anything about it whatsoever. I didn't see any trailers.
Me either. No, I didn't know anything about this brain transfusion stuff or anything.
Nope.
With that said, I do think that some of the actors acquitted themselves fairly well, including Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Now, the people that went with me, really, his gravelly voice annoyed them. I didn't personally have a problem with it, but it did feel like he was trying to search for some of those. He was trying to portray the evolution of this character slowly but surely, but I almost felt like he was fighting against the film. I felt like he was trying to add these layers. And I felt like some of his dialogue in particular was kind of interesting, like when he found himself saying cheers at one point. I thought that moment was kind of okay. I also, there's two schools of thought on this actor that I'm going to bring up here, because, I wasn't sure if I'm sure Jay Money is going to say he was just giving up. As far as I'm concerned, there was something really interesting about the passive way that Tommy Lee Jones approached this role. It was highly unexpected, very different, and I'm not sure if I care if it was a specific choice or if he was choosing just to take his paycheck and do as little as possible. But there was something interesting about, because he was consistent, certainly, in the idea that he was sort of like a meek guy, and he didn't really choose sides one way or the other, and he didn't really fight back. He wasn't really passionate one way or the other. I'm not sure how well it worked for the script or this movie, but it was interesting. Davy Joe. So those are performances I enjoyed. I have real issues with Gal Gadot and Gary Oldman, but I enjoyed those performances.
I will go as far as to say that I think I enjoyed this performance by Kevin Costner better than any performance I've ever seen him give. I've liked a lot of movies he's been in way more, but this was awesome. I mean, I loved it. I loved it, and yes, the cheers thing was great. Lots of laughs in the theater for that. And yeah, I like Tommy Lee Jones too. I thought he.
Our audience, you missed. I couldn't cut the J Money in time. He did this.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my god.
As Davey was talking, I like some of the choices he was making. Like I said, if you've not seen Kevin Costner in a perfect world, then you need to see that, because that is an amazing Kevin Costner performance. That I think is his best work.
I'll check it out. I liked Open Range was my favorite up until this.
Wow. Okay. He likes the obscure ones. We have so little time, but I really feel like I want to talk about I just want to and touch on this issue of where this movie could have gone. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and that is, and my biggest issues with the movie is it seems wasted opportunities to explore some issues, and so it didn't really have any depth. And so things that it could have talked about is, just explored more tampering with nature, / playing God. That has ramifications, and the science of it, and even the role of technology in our society. These are questions that this movie could have explored instead of. I didn't feel like there were any serious ramifications from the procedure. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So there's that. Secondly, heredity versus environment. We talked to something that at least I think Chappie did pretty well. A movie we talked about in episode 3 not too long ago. And even if you want to talk about class systems and things like that, there's something about the way that he grew up, and because now he has someone else's environment in his head, but he's still got his own heredity. That this duality of man type thing going on. Like Face Off does it even in its tongue-in-cheek way. Has and a lot of John Woo's movies deal with duality of man. The Killer being another example. Hard Boiled. Those films. This film could have been that. In fact, John Woo might have been the perfect director for this.
Yeah.
In hindsight, but there was opportunities there that were missed. So we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to at least ask you guys how you felt about that.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's absolutely true. For me, you're talking about opportunity that's missed. If you're going to have a premise like this that is definitely a little more abstract, then you have to explore it in a way that's more thought-provoking. You have to explore it in a way that is a little more over the top even. And this movie didn't really seem to concern itself with that. To your point right now, it just didn't want to actually answer any questions. It just sort of put out, this as a vehicle to make some action happen, and they didn't really worry about where the chips would fall with that. They didn't really care about Kevin Costner's character.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed focused on the action scenes. Let's get to the next action scene. And, there were scenes that had potential for emotional depth. And I felt like Kevin Costner was trying to add internal conflict going on. Wanting to steal, the Cheers moment, you know what I mean? That's a tongue-in-cheek example of this internal conflict going on. But, I did feel him, changing as the movie went along, slowly but surely, this other character seeping into his head. Quite literally. So, that's what I liked about his performance, but the movie needed, there needed to be more, side effects, there needed to be more depth, really.
Yeah, well, I think that the issue, and it might have actually affected the movie, was Ryan Reynolds made a movie with essentially the same premise just last year.
Yeah, right.
And in that movie was more of a more of a sci-fi.
Do you want to tell our audience, is this the Ben Kingsley thing?
Yes, if I remembered the title, I would have said it there, but I don't. I remember liking it, but I think that if they had played this a little more seriously and kind of focused on the science and the health aspects a little closer, it would have been too close of a carbon copy, especially given the fact that Ryan Reynolds is essentially playing just the other side of the same
coin. I don't care
coin.
about that. Each movie needs to stand on its own because, quite frankly, 5 years from now, no one's going to remember, like how close those movies were to in time. You got to make the movie for posterity.
5 years from now, but that was pretty recently. That was like last year, so maybe
I understand
maybe
that, but I mean, like, you want to make a movie that lasts, don't you?
Yeah, you do. But I think that might have been something that played a part in that.
All right. Well, we really have to go now. So we might be a little late on the Indie Spotlight. Indie Spotlight's coming up next, though, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. We're going to talk about A Dangerous Method, David Cronenberg's film from 2011. A little Freud and Jung action coming up. So excited for psychotherapy. Also, I wanted to let you guys know that our next current feature is going to be Keanu, the Key and Peele film, and we're going to be discussing that on Tuesday, May 3rd at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. That's our next current feature coming up in about 15 days. In the meantime, it's Indie Spotlight time coming up in about 6 minutes. We will see you shortly.